Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason Metallic Element Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. Welcome to your Mind University, because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or armored human being from popular culture and teach you everything you need to know about them in about an hour. And this week, Jason, we have a very exciting character who you love, who people have been screaming about for years. Who are we talking about today?
We are talking about one of the big dogs of the Avengers, and his name is Iron Man. Actually, his name is Tony Stark, but
his name is Iron Man.
Yes, his name is Iron Man. And it's time we talked about him. We're 212 episodes in. We have not talked about Tony Stark once. Classic Tony Stark is one of my favorite Marvel characters.
Nice.
And this lesson actually was suggested by some amazing listeners. Alex Bowen.
Oh, it's Alexis N. Bowen.
Oh, excuse me, Alexis N. Bowen. I tried to say you isn't a Bowen. I'm sorry, Alexis.
I believe that's the Tumblr name, which is why it's all lowercase and crammed together like that. That's my mistake. I'm sorry.
Yep, suggested by Alexis N. Bowen, at Fluidic Beats, and Nick Joseph. They have all suggested an Iron Man lesson. I know Iron Man has been requested for a very long time, so I hope you're happy.
Iron Man is like an OG request, so folks, sometimes you just got to be a little patient.
That's right.
We will get around to them eventually.
That's right. Well, it just seemed like this was the perfect time to talk about Iron Man, because, it's not like the Marvel movies are doing very well, right? We got to bring him back.
Well, and let's be honest, this podcast didn't exist when Iron Man 3 came out.
That's correct. All right, let's move into the first section of our podcast, the 10-cent origin,
where Professor Jason is going to break down all the basic creators and who's and what's and when's of Iron Man, in case you ever go to a really cool Avengers cocktail party and someone's like, who's that Iron Man person?
All right, Iron Man, of course, is a Marvel Comics character. His first appearance was in Tales of Suspense number 39 in March of 1963. He was created by 4 different people.
What?
Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, Don Heck, and Jack Kirby, who is actually the cover artist and character designer.
Don Heck is one of my favorite all-time comic people names.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I just think it sounds great.
His actual name is Anthony Edward Tony Stark.
Wow.
His species, of course, is human. He was born on Earth.
Get right out of town.
And his team affiliations have been the Avengers, the Department of Defense, Force Works, New Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, Illuminati, the Mighty Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D., Stark Industries, Stark Resilient, the Thunderbolts, and basically every other team that's ever existed in the Marvel Universe.
Okay.
And his partnerships have been with War Machine, Rescue, and Ironheart. His abilities include a genius-level intellect. He is proficient scientist and engineered, and of course he has a powered armor suit which has superhuman strength and durability. It is capable of supersonic flight. He has an energy repulsor and missile projection system, and it also has a regenerative life support system.
Cool.
So there you go. So Ashley, before we get to the main lesson, I just want to talk about our sponsor for today's episode, Leesa.
Nice.
Leesa is the company that wants to spring you into a better sleep. And I got to say this spring and this summer, Leesa has been springing me into a better sleep because I use a Leesa mattress and it's very super comfy. I got to say that my dreams are not complaining. Neither are the sheep that live in my dreams. They don't complain either. But Leesa is offering a deep discount to all of our listeners. You can get $125 off at leesa.com/geekhistory. Now, Leesa is a mattress company that is loved by over 300,000 happy sleepers and counting. They have 11,000 5-star reviews. And also, they're going to ship this mattress right to your front door. It arrives in this really compressed box. You open up the box, and it's like the mattress springs out to come get you. And it looks scary, but it's not scary because it's a mattress, and it's super comfortable. And Leesa mattresses, if you don't know, they're designed to provide support and pressure relief to every body type so you can get a deeper night's sleep. So remember, go to leesa.com/geekhistory. You're going to get $125 off. It's going to be delivered straight to your door. And you know what? It's going to be a real good, comfy sleep time for your sleepiness. Thank you to Leesa for sponsoring Geek History Lesson. All right, let's move into the meat history. They're the meat cute.
Yes, the meat cute.
Which is also the meat history.
That's right. It's a term we stole from romantic comedy writing, where we tell you the history of where we first met this character and how stinking cute it was.
Ashley, where'd you first meet Iron Man?
I don't know, man. I've heard about Iron Man for a long time, and I wasn't real interested in Iron Man because I was like, you know who also is a billionaire and a superhero? Batman, and he's cooler. I didn't see the first Iron Man movie until about 2012.
Blasphemy, as many people on the internet would say. I don't really care. But sure.
I think they're fine. And then, sort of post then, he's been a real staple of ye olde Marvel universe, so it's hard to escape him. I haven't read a ton of Iron Man either, so I'm really looking forward to learning some stuff in this lesson.
Sure.
How about you? Where did you meet your OG Iron Man?
I met Iron Man in a specific issue bought at a Walmart in Schnute, Kansas.
Classic Jason
which
origin.
Is a classic Jason meet cute. Iron Man issue number 271 is the exact first moment that I met Iron Man. It is a cover where the green hand of Fin Fang Foom, the dragon, holds Iron Man to the ground, and he's trying to blast at the dragon, but it's not working. And also, Ashley, don't know if you know, in Iron Man 271, Tony Stark's not Iron Man. James Rhodes is Iron Man.
Rhodey.
Yeah, so Rhodey was my first Iron Man, not Tony Stark.
Oh, so you've just thrown all expectations out the window, and you didn't even meet Tony Stark the first time.
That's right, I did not. He was like injured, and one of the many times you're going to learn that he, almost dies. But this started my love of Iron Man. This was Iron Man and Green Lantern. There was a section of time where those were like the only two comic books that I was buying. I was buying every issue that I could. Mm-hmm. Now I got every other issue, as many issues as I can. I remember one of the issues I got was Iron Man number 288, which is actually the introduction of War Machine.
Nice.
And it had a really shiny metallic cover. Like all the metallic parts of War Machine were metallic.
That sounds awesome.
And me as a little kid were just like, yes. But Iron Man after 271 was one of those titles that if I saw it when I went to Walmart, I bought it. And this is where my love of Iron Man comes from. Like a couple years ago, I think last year, I bought the action figure specifically based on this armor because he's a little bit clunkier, he's a little bit bigger, and his boots are so huge.
And I know you pride yourself on being a pre-Iron Man movie fan as well.
I am. I'm a I hate to say that, but I like Iron Man the comic books before the movie.
That's fair. It's your opinion. It's not wrong.
Yeah.
It's an opinion.
That's right. All right, let's go into the History 101.
And History 101 is the main meat of the lesson where Professor Jason is going to teach us everything we need to know about Iron Man. And I have my safety belt on. I have my AI with an inexplicable Irish accent.
You don't have a safety belt in an Iron Man suit. Get ready for that.
I have my safety helmet on, and I'm ready, Jason. Let's do this.
All right, so first I got to give you the publication history of Iron Man because, of course, Iron Man is created during the Marvel Age of Heroes. And
Science comics.
Yes, and it's kind of interesting to learn like where Stan Lee came up with each of the ideas, or so I think.
Cool.
In 1963, Stan Lee had been toying around with the idea of a businessman superhero. Lee said, and I quote, "I think I gave myself a dare. It was the height of the Cold War, true believers. The readers, the young readers. If there was one thing they hated, it was war. It was the military. So I got a hero who represented to the 100th degree. He was a weapons manufacturer, and he was providing weapons for the army. He was also rich. He was an industrialist, and I thought it would be fun to take the kind of character that nobody would like, none of our readers would like, and shove him down their throats and make them like him. And, of course, he became very popular. Excelsior!"
So Tony's always been a dick? That's what I'm taking from this, Mr. Lee.
Stan Lee was basically like, look, I'm going to write this story, and you're going to love it and screw you.
I'm a troll my fans. Okay, that's funny.
So now, while Stan Lee intended to write the story himself, a minor deadline emergency eventually forced him to hand over the premiere issue to Lieber, who fleshed out the story. The art for the story was split between Kirby and Heck. Jack Kirby actually designed the costume of Iron Man because he was doing the cover, because the covers were always done first. And Lee actually said, "Of all the comic books we published at Marvel, we got more fan mail from Iron Man, from women, from females, than any other title. We didn't get much fan mail from girls, but whenever we did, the letter was usually addressed to Iron Man. Excelsior!"
I find that funny on a number of levels.
It's kind of weird, right?
I think it's funny because I don't think of Tony Stark as being like one of the sexy characters that ladies are into.
I mean, back then he looked like Clark Gable.
I don't think Clark Gable's good looking. I'm going to throw that right out there.
Well, you weren't born in the 1960s.
No, but I mean, there were, there were some classic movie stars who were good looking. He wasn't one of them.
Sure.
I also think that's interesting because I can sort of understand it because of all of those kind of OG Marvel heroes, he was the only one who was like self-sufficient and rich and capable. Like a lot of the early Marvel characters
heroes,
are poor and often get lost in space.
Mm-hmm.
So I can sort of understand from that mentality why you would be like, well, this, if I was gonna date a superhero, it would be this guy.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to the comics history.
Cool.
So Tony Stark is the child of Howard and Maria Stark, correct, Ashley?
Yes.
Incorrect.
Martha Stark.
You are wrong about this. There is actually a very recent retcon that makes him the adopted child of Howard and Maria, and we'll learn of that when Tony does in his chronological history. So just remember that.
I remember that.
Maria and Howard it's not a retcon that I enjoy, but I want to tell you about it when Tony finds out about it. So,
okay.
Tony suffered from a strained relationship with his father and Howard's ever-increasing drinking habits, which caused him to verbally abuse Tony and suffer from mood swings. This last factor caused Tony to turn to electronics as a coping mechanism at barely 5 years old, as he started to believe that hardware was more comprehensible and reliable, where people were unpredictable and hard to understand.
This feels very prescient for the contemporary generation, I have to say.
By the age of 15, Tony had enrolled in MIT, which is, of course, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, if you don't know, in Boston, and he graduated at the top of his class just 4 years later with a double master's in physics and engineering.
In 4 years?
At 19. Tony's a smart guy.
Sure.
Yep. Now, Tony's mental dexterity caused him to drift into his 20s as a shiftless thrill seeker in the search for the challenges that mundane life lacked.
He's like, you know who's got it right? That Hal Jordan guy.
Eventually, actually, he would lose interest in all of the dangerous hobbies that he mastered, like skiing, parachuting, and hang gliding. And when he was 21, Tony's parents died in a car crash, and he inherited his father's business, Stark Industries. Within a few years, he turned it from solely a munitions firm to a multinational corporation with a range of interests covering virtually all types of contemporary scientific industry. It soon became a leader at cutting-edge electronics. Now, Tony also bought the company that built the car his parents were driving, because when they lost their lives because there was a fault in the brake system. Now, you later find out that unknown to Stark, the true architect of his parents' death, was actually a business move done by Republic Oil, later to be renamed Roxxon Oil.
Oh, Roxxon.
Yeah. Unlike the Winter Soldier as it is shown in the movies. But I
just assumed that Bucky cut their brake line.
I kind of like that turn of line that Tony was like, I'm going to buy that car and I'm going to make sure those brakes never fail.
I do too. I like that.
So, lacking in business skills, Tony promoted Secretary Pepper Potts to be his executive assistant and let the majority of his workload on her so that he could avoid it because he saw it as a burden.
Typical man.
Yeah. Now,
making a lady do it.
Now, during the war in Afghanistan, Stark was at one of his munitions plants testing new technology for the military when he was injured by his own landmine that lodged shrapnel near his heart. Now, actually, I don't know if you knew this, but Tony didn't actually go to Afghanistan the first time this story was told. Do you have a guess about where he actually was? This is a retcon.
The 1960s? I don't know much about
American... Well, yes, that's when this happened. I'm not asking the time, I'm asking the place.
I don't know much about American history. Vietnam?
Yes, he was in Vietnam. Yeah. Now, writers have actually updated the war and the locale with Stark every once in a while. In the original 1963 story, it was the Vietnam War. In the 1990s, it was updated to be the first Gulf War, and then eventually it was updated to be the war in Afghanistan in extremis. And that story is
gotta love that roving Marvel timeline.
Well, I want to talk about that. Do you like Marvel's constantly roving timeline? Because, okay, there are examples of it. Of course, the Fantastic Four were actually World War II veterans. Captain America has always been said to have been revived 10 years ago. So now, in this standards, he's revived somewhere around 2006, 2008.
Yeah, I hate that.
So he has always known a world with Twitter and Facebook, whereas Tony, to me, is kind of the main example of it. To me, it's honest with you, the first time I realized the Marvel roving timeline was a thing was reading Extremis when they updated it to Afghanistan.
Yeah. I don't love the roving timeline. I would prefer with larger comic book continuities like Marvel or DC that we sort of did the Simpsons of it all. Now, they recently, in the last few years, at the time of the recording of this podcast, have started a roving timeline. Homer and Marge used to have met in the 70s. Now they've met in the 90s. But I liked how up until that change, it's sort of the Grant Morrison idea that like everything happened and all of it's valid, and it doesn't work when you put it in your brain and think about it logically, but I don't mind that. So I would rather it started when it started and it's just sort of amorphously been going since then. And
I would just say like you could do an easy retcon where it's just a story in a jungle. It doesn't have to be specifically around the Vietnam War. It could still be in Vietnam.
Or just don't address, like if it's going to be weird, don't address it. Like don't put a year on it. To me, it also takes away from not from Tony Stark, but there are some characters I think it takes away from. I think Punisher is one of those characters.
Yes.
I think Reed and Ben are some of those characters who, because their origins are so tied to specific historical events, I think moving them up takes something away from them. So I'm not a huge fan of it. But it's an editorial choice.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to Tony.
Okay.
So Tony was injured, right? And then he was captured by a local warlord named Wang Chu, who was actually a lackey of the Mandarin.
Okay.
And he was forced under a threat of death to create a doomsday weapon for him with another captive, the famed Nobel Award-winning physicist Yinsen. Now, the shrapnel was going to enter his heart and kill him, but him and Yinsen created an arc reactor which kept the shrapnel away from his heart. In response, Tony built a suit of armor to help him escape captivity, and in the suit, Stark took on the warlord and his men, and he avenged Yinsen's death, and thus Iron Man was born.
Woo!
After fleeing from enemy territory, Tony met and befriended the pilot James Rhodes, who had also been shot down in his helicopter. And by working together, they were able to make their escape and arrive back in the United States. Now, Tony decided to continue being Iron Man in order to fight injustice, but he believed that he had a limited amount of time left to live due to his injury, and therefore wanted to make the most of it. So he began making vast improvements to the technology and the power of his armor. Now, Ashley, I want to talk about James Rhodes, Rhodey, the War Machine.
Yes, let's.
Do you like his relationship with Tony?
I do.
Does it make sense to you?
It does.
Would they be friends?
I think so. I do think so.
In this origin, I think they would definitely be friends.
Shared
experiences.
Even in the MCU, I get it because their personalities are so different. And I definitely think even when Tony is at his most dickish, there is a mutual respect together that binds them.
Yeah.
I really like Rhodey, and I think that he brings out the best in Tony, whereas ironically Cap brings out some of the worst in Tony. So I am pro Rhodey.
Nice. Now, back in the United States, Stark redesigned his chest plate, which contained a pacemaker-like device, and reduced the chest plate's size and weight so he could wear it under his normal clothing. Required to wear the armor's chest plate at all times to keep his heart alive and beating, Stark decided to put the rest of the armor to regular use as well. After redesigning the entire armored suit to match the lighter chest plate, Stark made the existence of the suit public, and he concealed the suit's true origin as well as the fact that he himself had to wear the chest plate to live. But Stark made it known that he would soon manufacture the suit, which he called the Human Machine, for sale to be public.
Tony, that's a terrible name. That's up there with the Human Spider.
I don't think so.
It's a terrible name.
I think it's a great choice.
Terrible.
And I think it's good.
Well, it's your money.
Yep. Now, when Tony finally admitted his double identity to his current fiancée, Joanna Niven, she encouraged him to use the armor to become a superhero and save lives.
Oh, good for that character I've never heard of.
And Iron Man began to establish himself as one of the U.S.'s most powerful superheroes. So while he was halting a breakout of lions and tigers from a circus because Stan Lee in the 60s loved circuses, Tony saw how his armor frightened the people he was defending, and asking his date, Marion, what she would do if she were Iron Man, Tony painted his armor in stainless gold.
Tony should just painted a smile on it.
That's right.
Just like that happy face emoji.
Tony Stark allowed the public at large to believe that he was no more than a rich playboy, while his identity as Iron Man would remain a secret. And since Iron Man was often seen at Stark Industries, Tony started circulating the idea that Iron Man was his personal bodyguard.
I love that.
Now, Stark, of course, still had his heart condition, which meant that any day could potentially be his last. And luckily for him, his heart condition became publicly known, and he was eventually healed by way of an artificial heart transplant.
Woo.
While testing his Stark special race car, Tony wound up in a wreck. And he was, and he was saved at the last minute by ex-boxer Harry Happy Hogan.
Oh, that guy.
And to repay Happy, Tony hired him as a chauffeur, although Happy eventually became more like a bodyguard and started resenting Iron Man because he thought Iron Man was taking his work.
I love that. Hey, you mean a lot to me. You really helped me out. Do you want to be my servant?
I'm going to give you a paycheck.
Yeah.
During this time, the original Crimson Dynamo, who is kind of another Russian armored character.
It's a great name.
Yep. Attacked Stark Industry. But Tony Stark persuaded him to defect because the USSR was around at the time.
Back in the USSR.
Yep. Also, Stark faced off against the Mandarin for the very first time, and Mandarin would become one of his most and biggest recurring enemies. Now, after Thor, the Hulk, Ant-Man, Wasp, and Iron Man all defeated Loki together, Ant-Man suggested that the five of them stay together as a team, and the Wasp dubbed them the Avengers. Now, Stark donated his Manhattan mansion to the Avengers for their exclusive use. And shortly afterwards, after a fight with the Space Phantom, everyone's favorite villain that we've seen in the MCU.
Yeah, that classic.
Yep. The Hulk decided to quit since he thought no one trusted him.
Well, that's fair.
Yep. Whilst in pursuit of the Hulk and Namor, the Avengers came upon the body of Captain America, a legendary World War II fighter. The Avengers accepted him into their ranks, and he became close friends with Iron Man. Iron Man even gave Captain America transistors to control the flight of his shield, even though Captain America later discarded them since they ended up to upset the balance of the shield. Now, after a fight with the original Masters of Evil, which ended with Baron Zemo being killed, Iron Man, Giant Man, Wasp, and Thor all decided to take leave of the team since they needed a break, and Captain America stayed on and became the new leader of the Avengers.
And people who are familiar with our lessons on members of the Avengers, they quit the team and then rejoin a lot.
That's right.
So get ready.
Yep. Now, Ashley, do you like Iron Man stories where he is with the Avengers, or do you like Iron Man where he's a solo character better? Which stories do you think work better for Iron Man?
I prefer him with the Avengers or with the supporting cast because and most of my reading has been the sort of modern version of Tony Stark,
Sure.
and I kind of think he's a dick. And I think that other characters like Rhodey or like Cap can balance him out in a more interesting way. How about you as the bigger Iron Man fan?
Solo.
Solo, yeah?
Yeah. He's not a team player.
Well, as evidenced by Civil War.
He's totally not a team player. Now, I like him in the Avengers, but I don't like what he's become in modern runs where he's become the leader of the Avengers.
Yeah.
I don't think
you think Cap should lead the Avengers?
Cap should totally lead the Avengers. Cap is a much better leader. Tony's too much of a reckless guy.
He's brash.
He's brash and he's reckless and he rushes into battle. Like, Cap thinks it out. And I don't know. I like Tony by himself because Tony does a lot of stupid things for being so smart.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there you go.
Cool.
In the wake of the Kree-Skrull War, Stark initiated a meeting in Wakanda with Professor X, Mr. Fantastic, Black Bolt, Doctor Strange, and Namor to form a clandestine, unnamed group to devise strategy and policy regarding overarching nemesis. Now, they called themselves the Illuminati, and Stark's original goal was to create a governing body for all superheroes in the world to answer to. However, their different beliefs and philosophies, and besides the fact that none of these heroes decided to reveal their real identities, made Stark's plan impractical. However, this group decided to call on themselves and share vital information from time to time.
Even though Doctor Strange's name is just Doctor Strange. That's fine.
Now, soon, Tony would face his greatest enemy ever.
A heart condition.
No, alcohol.
Oh, damn it. I should have seen that one coming.
That's right. So Tony became the victim of corporate takeovers, and he would lose and rebuild his fortune multiple times. I'm not going to talk a lot about them a lot. It happens all the time.
Great.
Tony would
American dream.
Yep. Tony would also eventually be led to an alcohol addiction, which when he discovered that S.H.I.E.L.D., who he had previously supported, was seeking to buy controlling stocks in his company, thus ensuring that he would continue developing weapons for them. Later, Tony would become bankrupt again and homeless again when he lost his company again to his rival Obadiah Stane, who had been manipulating him from time to time. Now, during this event, his friend James Rhodey Rhodes even took up the mantle of Iron Man, and Stark would begin rebuilding his fortune when he created a company called Circuits Maximus.
That's cool. I like that.
Really?
I do.
Sounds like a bad knockoff of Circuit City to me.
It's a very lame comic book name, but I like it. It appeals to me.
Now, Circuits Maximus
You're going to have to say that. It's going to be difficult.
actually specialized in computer technology.
What?
Which, as we all know, is part of the future.
And is also almost always evil?
Yes. Well, not in this storyline.
Oh,
but
cool. Well, great.
in the time of the 70s, computers were considered to be the brink of the human evolution with machines and were considered to be some of the most advanced factors in our lives.
I feel like we're getting a version of the Flight of the Conchords song Robots, the verse that was cut.
Be careful what you say, human.
I will not.
Now, while all of this was happening and Tony was buying commercial space on local television stations for Circuits Maximus.
I hope that's true. I mean, headcanon accepted.
Rhodey was slowly going mad.
No!
Yep.
Rhodey, you're the sane one.
Nope.
You're the level-headed, calm down, Cheadle one.
Not this time, because using the Ironman armor for Rhodey was driving him mad because the unique interface was designed for Tony Stark's nervous system and not Rhodey's.
God, Tony's so selfish.
So Rhodey eventually succumbs and goes on a rampage. Not the Rock's rampage like you saw in a movie recently, but a rampage.
No one saw that movie.
This caused Tony to use a prototype armor that was not yet finished in order to stop Rhodey from causing any more destruction. Now, following this incident, Rhodey repeatedly tried to convince Tony to resume the Iron Man mantle, but Tony kept saying no. He's like, look, I'm making good money with the Circuits Maximus, man. You see our ratings in these local commercials? They're killer.
Yeah.
Now, somewhat fearful of his past alcoholism and how Obadiah Stane had taken advantage of it, Tony felt that he had grown dependent on the armor and felt that he had rotted on the inside. As a result, Tony didn't feel worthy to wear high-tech armor, and Rhodes used and relied on the suit armor more and more and more. Now, following this incident, again, as I said, he was trying to convince Tony to take up the mantle, and Tony didn't want to, but eventually Tony developed a brand new suit of armor and nicknamed it the Silver Centurion. This is a kind of a blocky silver and red version of the Iron Man armor that a lot of people probably know of.
Do you like it? Do you like the design?
It's okay.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of it.
That's fair.
He'd been working on this apparently for months, and it had been his secret project, and he confronted Stane face to face. Stane also used his own suit of armor, which he called the Iron Monger, to battle him in response. Although Stane had an abundance of ways in which he planned to defeat Stark, Tony overcame each obstacle and managed to send Stane running. As a result, Stane killed himself by removing his helmet and blowing off his own head with a repulsor ray in his gauntlet.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, he's so cocky and arrogant that he decided to blow up his old brain with a repulsor ray. You know, the way everybody likes to, end their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Stark...
What?
Yep. So Stark decided that although one is never truly cured of alcoholism, he also did not deny the responsibility of being Iron Man. So he resumed his career as Iron Man and joined a new branch of Avengers. A branch of Avengers called West Coast Avengers. Down.
You're welcome, listener.
It's been a long time since we brought back the West Coast Avengers.
It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk about one of the OG Avengers, so this is fun.
That's right. So, of course, a lot of this, as you can tell, Ashley, was, pieces and parts of the first Iron Man movie. Now,
yeah.
Ashley, there's a lot of stories where Iron Man is forced to either build a new suit of armor to win,
that, yeah.
or he has to go back and wear the original armor to win.
Yeah.
Do you think this is lazy storytelling, or do you think that this is, since he's an engineer, this is something that's kind of inherent in the character, that like, oh, I can't beat this problem, I'm just going to build a brand new suit?
I'm going to science it. I think it is part and parcel also of the gimmick of the character. Like, It's a man with a suit. And you're only going to have that mech armor be so good for so long. I don't know if I love it, though. I understand it.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like it when he has to go back into the original Iron Man suit.
There's a lot of times where his current armor breaks and he goes back to the original gray suit.
Yeah, I think...
Or the Silver Age suit.
I think the bell's probably been rung on that too many times.
Way too many times.
But I can understand the romanticism of that a little more. I also understand that when a new artist comes onto the book, you want to give them the opportunity to design the Iron Man suit.
Yeah.
As happens with all superheroes.
Yeah.
But Tony actually has an in-story reason for doing that.
Sure he does.
So
yeah.
I get it. I don't know if I'll love it.
Sure. That's fine. Now, Tony spends some time with Hawkeye and the West Coast Avengers. Dun, dun, dun. But after all that partying on the West Coast with Mockingbird.
That partier.
Yep. It all leads into a famous Iron Man event called Armor Wars.
Hey!
Now, Stark learned that an industrialist calling himself Spy Master had stolen the plans for many secret Stark technological innovations found in the Iron Man armor. Spy Master then turned over these plans to Stark's most powerful business rival, Justin Hammer, who in turn sold them to criminals.
Okay.
With so many people gaining access to his armor designs, Tony had to figure out a way to stop all the misuse of his armor technology. He would eventually develop a way to disable the armors of anyone who used any kind of technology based on his design, and thus began the Armor Wars. Tony would even disable shield armor technology known as the Mandroids that he had designed for them.
The Mandroids!
Yep, yep, the Mandroids.
That's a terrible... one thing I've definitely learned, listeners, Iron Man, terrible naming conventions.
That's right. So the Mandroids were designed for the use of the United States government, and the U.S. government had decided to go after Iron Man because of this as public enemy number one and saw him as a threat to national security. Now, Tony eluded capture by fooling them into believing that Iron Man had gone rogue. However, Tony's good friend, both inside and outside the armor, Captain America Steve Rogers, was not fooled by this and tried to persuade Tony from taking on the U.S. government. Tony pretended to comply, but in the end, continued his crusade, going as far as to electrocute Captain America once Captain America tried to stop him physically. Although Cap wasn't hurt badly in any way, this actually created some fiction between the two, which lasted in each of their titles for quite a while. So this is one of the very first times that Captain America and Iron Man, a trope that we will see come up many, many times, especially in modern day storytelling, and even in the movies, this is one of the first instances we see of that.
Interesting. I didn't realize it was this seated this far back.
The rivalry, yes.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Now, Tony Stark publicly claimed that he had fired Iron Man in displeasure over his illegal activity.
All right, Tony.
And he went even as far to create a false history for Iron Man, saying that Randall Pierce is the original Iron Man's identity, which he turned over to the government.
Sure.
Shortly afterward, Iron Man was apparently destroyed in combat with governmental forces. However, Stark survived, and he created an even more sophisticated armored battlesuit to wear as Iron Man, using technology far more advanced than which Spy Master had stolen from him.
Sucker.
Now, Stark continued to go into action as Iron Man and publicly claimed that the previous Iron Man was dead and that another employee of whose identity was being kept secret was now wearing the armored suit. So Tony is continuing to use the Iron Man armor. He discovers that its interface design was causing severe damage to his nervous system. Sounds a little bit like that story with Rhodey, huh?
Yeah, it kind of does.
So he began remotely controlling all the Iron Man armors. And after a failed mission against the Masters of Silence, he realizes that controlling the Iron Man armor is not as effective as being inside it. This leads Tony to design the War Machine armor, which is actually called the Variable Threat Response Battlesuit.
Great.
Now, inside this suit, his nervous system would continue to deteriorate, however, even to the point where it became life-threatening. So Tony had to fake his own death again.
Did he really? Tony, did you have to?
I just had to do it. I had to, it's I'm doing a thing, and I had to do it.
I don't know. Yeah. I feel like your problem-solving skills are a little lacking for that.
Oh, excuse me. I'm working on new armor here. Hold on.
Which sports car is this modeled after?
Huh?
Which sports car is this modeled after?
Dodge Viper.
Okay, that classic death trap.
The blue steel Dodge Viper. Yep.
Well, all right.
I see the future.
A blue Iron
future
Man
comes around.
suit. Oh.
Future comes around. I have a blue suit. It's called the stealth suit.
What is it? Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, I've never seen it.
Yep. It's in
Does it
comics.
look like the Batman blue suit? The bunny?
It's all solid blue.
Okay.
Yep.
If you say so.
It's just future.
Cool.
Future stuff. Runs on batteries.
Don't they all?
Huh?
Don't they all
No,
run on
Duracells.
batteries?
Duracells. This runs on Duracells.
Oh, like some double A's?
Nope, it all goes in a circle. Eventually, we're going to come around to double A's. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
If you say so.
Yep. I got another piece of armor. Steam powered.
Steam powered.
Yep.
Oh, that's trendy.
Technology is a circle, baby.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yep.
Several times
What you doing
in the
with it?
last about minute or so.
You want an armor?
No.
You want me to build your suit armor?
No. Absolutely
Thing's
not.
going to run on whale feces.
Whoa. I don't know how to to take that. I feel like that's a comment about me.
Comes around in circles, baby. Technology.
I mean, I guess it's bioorganic, so I can get behind that.
Yep.
Cool.
We're going to call it the Ocean Master.
It's a DC character.
I'm taking it back.
Good talk, Tony. Good talk. Let's never do this again.
So Tony has to fake his own death again.
Right, has to.
And he has to be put into suspended animation to survive.
Because he couldn't just hide out in his mansion
Nope.
somewhere.
Well, he's sick. He's dying. His brain is falling apart. Even close friends like James Rhodes were unaware that he faked his death. And when he would later reveal the deception, it would cause a serious rift in their relationship. Also during this time, James Rhodes would watch over the company Stark Industries and would continue Iron Man's career by using the variable threat response battlesuit, or as he would name it, War Machine.
Better name.
Yep. Of course, Tony would eventually awaken and survive with a chip he programmed and implanted in himself. And an enraged James Rhodes takes the variable threat response battlesuit and begins his own career as a hero, solo hero for the very first time.
Good for you, Rhodey.
Now, actually, I want to ask you this. You'd agree that the War Machine armor is kind of a staple of the Marvel Universe, correct?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, which is interesting because he's sort of a sidekick character. Now, how long do you think the War Machine armor has been around? Like, around what time period do you think War Machine showed up?
I kind of know when Rhodey showed up.
Just guess. It's fine.
I don't know, 1996.
You're pretty close. It's 92.
Ooh, I was
92.
closer to that. That's a good for me.
But I just want to talk about because it's a very recent addition to the Marvel Universe.
In the scope of comics history, for sure,
but
yeah.
When you look at its entire history, it's interesting because I kind of think War Machine is now a main player staple of Iron Man. I mean, some of
that is due to the films, of course.
Sure. But even in Iron Man 1, we got a War Machine reference.
That's true, yeah.
In Iron Man 1.
Yeah.
So that just shows you, and ever since he took the War Machine armor, there's almost always been a War Machine solo series. It cancels, goes back and forth.
Or he's leading an Avengers team. Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, it sure as hell worked because I bought that shiny ass cover.
Yeah. Do you have a War Machine action figure?
I do.
Yeah, there you go. Jason is pointing to it. Only I can see it.
Yes.
You're welcome.
It's the Don Cheadle version.
It is, which is a great version of that armor, I will say.
They haven't made very many good versions of the War Machine armor. And I wish they would because I kind of want the classic, the first one where he's got the giant machine gun on it. Because to me, that's what War Machine always has a gun over his shoulder. That's the way I look at it.
I think that informs the name too.
Yeah. They haven't made a really good version of that one. They made a Marvel Legends one a long time ago. But I also have the War Machine version of the Ultimate Iron Man armor.
Yes, you do, yeah.
Which I think is really cool.
Cool.
So I own a lot of Iron Man action figures. I could have my own armory. I don't have all of them, but there's a lot of Iron Man action figures out there.
Yeah, you definitely don't have all of them.
No, I don't. All right, now we're going to talk about one of the dumbest and one of the weirdest storylines ever in Tony's history.
I'm ready.
It's called The Crossing.
Okay.
Now, actually, The Crossing is very 90s.
Okay.
It's excessively 90s.
Do they have feet?
They do, but they have gritting teeth for days. And, the Avengers kind of wander around with leather jackets on them because they're badass.
Well, they are.
Hawkeye is shown during one scene of this firing an arrow through the hand of a mugger.
Oh, that's a very arrow move.
Beast, who is actually part of the team at this time, even says that, oh, don't you think an arrow through the hand was, I don't know, a trifle severe? And then the storyline,
Good job, Hank.
We get angst. Lots and lots of angst and male characters who look like they're abusing steroids. But basically, this whole storyline was an attempt to reboot Iron Man and the Avengers because at this time in Marvel history, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Thor, the Avengers, Captain America were not selling well.
But Jason, it's 2000-something teens. The Avengers are the most popular thing ever. Are you telling me that wasn't always true?
In the early 90s, that was not true.
What?
Characters that led the Marvel Universe in the 1990s were the X-Men.
Should be.
What an interesting flip period we live in now, where the Avengers lead the Marvel universe again.
But the cinematic universe.
But back in the day, they almost canceled every one of these books.
That's wild.
So this was an attempt to reboot the series and also an attempt to save these books.
Did it work? Not so much.
It did not. Okay, the storyline is this.
Okay, I'm ready.
So Tony Stark is revealed as an unwitting traitor to the Avengers while under the control of Kang the Conqueror. Ashley, do you know who Kang the Conqueror is?
Kang the Conqueror is a time-traveling Marvel villain.
Yeah, basically.
He's got a purple face, and he becomes Iron Lad in Young Avengers.
Yes. Now, it's revealed that Kang the Conqueror had been actually using Stark as an unwilling undercover agent for several years.
I hate those kind of retcons.
Now, Kang used Iron Man to kill many innocent lives and other heroes, such as Rita Damara, who is the second Yellow Jacket, and other Avengers teammates. So the Avengers got their asses handed to themselves by Tony Stark, and they decided, oh man, who's the only other person that could defeat Tony Stark?
Rhodey.
No, another Tony Stark, a teenage Tony Stark.
Oh, that is so 90s and so terrible.
So the Avengers travel back in time to recruit a teenage Tony Stark, a 19-year-old Tony Stark, to fight present-day Tony Stark and Kang.
I feel like this part of the lesson is coloring my past opinions on the all-new X-Men run.
Well, I will say that once we get to the end of this, you will learn very quickly. You'll be like, oh, Brian Michael Bendis, when he was writing All New X-Men, he definitely knew about this storyline.
Okay.
So I think a lot of also, if you're a fan of any of the Marvel titles or you're reading during the 90s, you know about this storyline simply because it is heralded as being like really bad.
Like Clone Saga?
Yeah. Now, the teen Tony Stark is able to steal an Iron Man armor from his older self and use it in battle against him. And during the battle, the present-day Tony Stark would regain his memories and realize what he had been forced to do, basically murder. And as a result, he ended up sacrificing himself in order to kill Kang. Now, the teenage Tony Stark would stay in the present timeline following Iron Man's death and continued his life as the new Iron Man. The young Tony remained at Avengers Mansion. He enrolled in school and said no relation, as many people on the street would ask if he was named after or related to Tony Stark.
Why didn't he just change his name?
Because he's got to be Tony Stark. Tony Stark's Iron Man.
Well, his middle name's Edward, so why isn't he like Eddie Stark?
I don't know. But readers had little time to get to know this new young Tony Stark, as soon the Avengers would face Onslaught.
Oh, Jason's favorite.
And that is where we are going to end part 1 of Iron Man.
What?
Yes, that is right.
I'm shocked.
Now, this Iron Man's history is very big. It's very long. So we, of course, had to split it into 2 episodes. Now, all the regular end of the episode stuff, like recommended reading, will be in part 2. But we can't do the honor roll. Ashley, what's that?
The honor roll is the part of the podcast where if you head on over to iTunes, you give us a 5-star review, and you write anything, we will read it, because giving us a 5-star review helps other cool nerds find us and enroll in the Mind University.
The first member of the honor roll is T-Rex 1895, who says, "Great work. This podcast has given me great insight into quite a few characters that don't get enough attention. And you should do a GHL on the DC Weekly Series 52, one of Jason's favorite series." That is true.
You can tell they were a longtime listener.
And one that really shines a light on the lesser known characters. All right, T-Rex 1895, thank you for that review. And there's a highlights magazine in the corner underneath the sofa. Go enjoy.
Yeah, maybe some Reader's Digest.
Yep. And also joining the honor roll of Geek History Lesson is JC Powell 14.
Hey, welcome.
Who says, like many nerds, over the years I found my knowledge in certain subjects to be incomplete at times. I look forward to each new episode of the show, as Jason and AVR always seem to either teach me about a topic I was clueless about or find something new and interesting information about a topic that I thought myself to be an expert on. My knowledge gaps are very apparent in DC Comics as I grew up as a Marvel fanboy, and now I can tell you the difference between Infinite Crisis, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Final Crisis, and more.
Oh boy, I can't.
The hosts have an amazing chemistry together, and I dread the recommended reading section only because I know the episode is coming to a close. Thank you.
That's so sweet.
Thank you for the great content. P.S. Long live the Doctor Strange impressions, the interruptions, and any and all special episodes.
Oh, nice.
So, JC Powell, welcome. Doctor Strange welcomes you.
And so does Clea.
Clear.
Yeah, Stevie, what's up?
No.
What's up, babe?
I'm trying to tell JC Powell about the bagels in the corner.
I just got so excited from my home in the dark dimension. I don't get to see you that often, so it just means a lot.
If we do not let JC Powell have some of those bagels, they will be infected with mold. And magic from the dark dimension?
Well, I mean, the latter part of that's fine.
Well, that's where mold comes from.
Mold does not come from the dark dimension.
I have been to the dark dimension, Clea. I know where mold
I know,
comes from.
I just no-anded you. I'm so sorry. It's such rude improv etiquette.
It's all good. So thank you so much, Tayrex1895 and JC Powell, number 14. And apologies to anybody else who hates those sections of the podcast.
Too bad.
If you want to join the honor roll, just go over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. You can write anything you want. You can literally insult us. I'm so glad nobody's done that so far. But you help us in the search algorithm of iTunes, and we'll give you a nice shout out on the show.
Yeah.
So don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and everywhere else you can listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter at GHL Podcast for the podcast, at Jawiin for me, and at Ashley V. Robinson for Ashley. Also, don't forget to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Jawiin. That's how you can support this free-to-you podcast and listen to more podcasts like the Patreon-exclusive show, Geek History Lesson Extra. Today's episode that you can go over to Patreon and listen to is what is our favorite Ironman armor and why? Dun, 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 dun. I'm really excited about that because I don't know what Ashley's favorite armor is. So we have to pull up a list for that?
I might have to.
Oh, okay. And now we come to the final section of the podcast. Hashtag stick around, where we have a little last conversation just to see.
I almost swore in excitement.
Did you?
Almost.
About hashtag stick around?
Yeah, it's fun because I never know what's going to happen.
Ashley.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts on Tony Stark so far.
Oh, man. Still kind of a dick.
But he's not as much of a dick.
No, he's more... maybe less of a dick. He's a little more unhinged, I think, than I expected him to be. Because, like I said, most of what I know about him is from the MCU, and that version is very control freaky and doesn't like being questioned. This one just seems like the kind of scientist who will run away with an idea, whether or not it's the smartest or safest plan. And I'm interested to see where the turn in the character comes because I know more of what he's like in the modern comics.
Yes. Do you know why I like this version of Iron Man?
No.
Because he's hopeful.
Oh, look at you with your It Means Hope Superman.
I like this because this version of Iron Man is, especially the Iron Man we've seen so far, and we'll get a little bit more of this Iron Man. To me, I feel Civil War is the turning point.
I think that's a fair assertion.
So Iron Man is kind of this guy who looks at a problem, and many people would say that's unsolvable. You can't solve it. You can't fix it. You can't do it. And Iron Man, Tony Stark, is the character that's like, no, we can do it. We can do it. Give me a couple days and a wrench and I'll fix it. He's an engineer. He's always trying to fix or improve things. And that's the thing that I think has been lost in modern Iron Man. To me, that's a very hopeful character. The character that's always like, I can fix that. All you got to do is make a new screw for that and it'll work.
So I want to make an observation that your description of Tony sounds very similar to the way you described Reed Richards. Which character do you like better?
Reed.
Reed? Okay.
But Reed and Tony, classic Reed and classic Tony, are best friends.
Are they?
Reed has helped Tony design several versions of his armor.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Because they work in compatico. They like
simpatico,
simpatico. They kind of finish each other's sentences and stuff like that. We'll talk about a specific armor that Reed helps design for Tony. We're going to talk about like what I think is my favorite armor that Reed helps him with.
Cool.
Reed is smarter, but Tony is more nuts and bolts. And it's interesting because
Reed's more abstract, you would say?
Yes.
Okay.
Because Reed is more about like dimensional energy and black holes and stuff like this. And Tony's a nuts and bolts guy.
Tony's the guy who likes cars.
Yeah, Tony's the car guy. Tony's like, how can I make the machine that can measure the black hole? Whereas Reed is just like,
I'm going to go into the black hole.
I'm going to go into the black hole, and when I'm inside the black hole, I'm going to give you all these mathematical equations about how the black hole works.
Okay,
and,
cool.
And Tony's like, no. I'm just going to design a camera so you don't have to go in the black hole. And Reed's like, no. I've already built the ship. We're going in the black hole.
But I could go in the black hole.
And then at the same time, Sue and Pepper are over in the corner and just being like, oh my God, these guys.
Just drinking tea, and they're like,
yeah, they do.
Man.
They're drinking tea and they're friends. And but they're constantly like, Tony and Reed are constantly trying to one up each other.
Yeah.
They are. Reed is more about the truth, I think, than Tony. Tony's about hope, because again, Tony's about, I fixed the thing. Like Tony looks at something and sees a problem or sees how it can be improved.
I mean, Tony literally fixes himself.
Yeah, Reed is more about what is that? Why is that? How is that? Reed wants to take everything he sees and take it through the scientific method. Tony's more about like, hey lady, I can make it a little bit. You don't like high heels? I'm going to make you rocket heels.
Well, that would sell me on high heels.
See, that's Tony. That's Tony. Reed would be more like, Sue, why do you wear high heels when they're painful? I don't understand that.
Yeah.
That's the difference between the two characters.
It's funny. You phrasing it like that makes Reed seem like a much better husband. And I don't know if I believe Reed's a good husband.
Reed is a good husband.
I don't know.
Reed is forgetful. Tony Stark is always a terrible boyfriend. Always.
Yeah.
Because think about it. Tony's the guy that, and Reed does this too, but Reed will lock himself in a closet and work on something.
Yeah.
But Reed will eventually be like, oh crap, I got children, and he'll walk out. Tony will never, ever do that.
But Tony doesn't have children.
Yes, but even like there's been several storylines where Tony has had ladies and he's completely ghosted them.
Yeah.
Because he's building the thing. Because Tony will not stop until he finishes the thing. And it doesn't matter if that takes 6 months.
Yeah.
Reed eventually will be like, oh crap, I got a wife.
I have a family.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's the difference between the two characters.
Cool. I didn't mean to necessarily steal the topic, but
it's all right. It's all good. It's all good. And that means that we are at the end of this Geek History lesson. I am Jason Red and Gold Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. And Professor Jason, will you please dismiss the class?
Class dismissed, and I'll see you at MIT.